we've talked about it in letters, and we've talked about it on the phone. But how you really feel about it, I don't really know.
What's your take on Cassavetes? 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 Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. Misogynist. Genius. What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on Cassavetes? What's your take on...
Welcome to There's Sometimes a Buggy, Irresponsible Opinions About Classic Film. I'm Elise.
I'm Dave. This week, it's our summer special subject.
Chosen by Dave.
We're going to be talking about Summer with Monika, directed by Ingmar Bergman, and then move over to Delmer Dave's A Summer Place.
From 1953 and 1959, respectively. What prompted you to choose these movies to do together, Dave, other than they had summer in the title?
Well, that was all that
was
prompted
it.
me to.
That was it. So
I had never seen Summer with Monika, so I had no idea that it would actually fit fairly well with A Summer Place.
Well, you knew it was a sexy movie about Harriet Andersson. That's
yeah.
all anyone really knows about it who hasn't seen it. I barely was able to even find anything written about it, just one substantial piece on the internet. But yeah, I mean, it did end up having more in common, including the fact that they were both movies about very young lovers who, spoilers, find themselves faced with a pregnancy, although what develops from there is quite different.
Yeah, they go in different directions ultimately, but yeah, they do hit some similar points. Summers and their consequences.
Right, which the movie Grease, that has that song, Look at Me, I'm Sandra Dee, in it, kind of borrows from that by starting its plot on the beach.
That's true. Summer days.
Drifting away. Although, no pregnancy for that couple.
No.
Well, no, there is a pregnancy scare in the movie.
Yeah, Rizzo.
Yes. Rizzo, who actually, her situation parallels Sandra Dee, even though she's singing mockingly about her. So, Grease doesn't seem to understand the tropes of a Sandra Dee movie. But first, we're going to start with...
Summer with Monika.
Right.
The article that you found describes it as one of the urtexts or touchstones of the teen film genre.
Well, I'm not sure. It's just this particular writer, whoever they are, seems to feel that it encapsulates a lot of those tropes. Oh, well, there it is. Film critic Adrian Martin. Perhaps this is an actual film critic whose work is simply being put on this site? I have no idea.
Okay.
I don't know. Showing my ignorance here. If Adrian Martin is a well-known film critic, search me. I have no idea. It was a good write-up.
This is a fairly early Ingmar Bergman film.
Not that early, actually. Interestingly, the Wikipedia entry under the partial filmography lists this as the second film. So as far as American audiences or North American audiences are concerned, this is an early Bergman film, but it was actually his 12th. And apparently, I did not know this. I knew he was notorious for having affairs with his actresses and then going on to work with them for long after that. But I didn't know that maybe this was the first or the first serious one, because he actually left his wife and family for Harriet Andersson, who was barely 20.
That's right.
And he was, he wasn't terribly old.
I think he was in his mid-30s.
Yes, but he did have a wife and family.
Yeah, there's a lot of lore around this that I've encountered. There was the legend that he had discovered her on an elevator, but I think I read that she dispelled that rumor and that she had been in a bunch of movies before this in bit part. She had worked in an elevator when she was 14, but Ingmar Bergman didn't find her there. I guess, yeah, at the time there were sort of Lana Turner-ish stories circulated about her, right? That she was
she certainly does wear a sweater well.
She is a sweater girl in this movie, for sure. And
even a double sweater at one point.
It sounds like Swedish media presented her as, this could be you.
But could it really?
No, she's an extraordinary looking person. She did play characters like this that are supposed to be like the audience rather than above the audience.
Well, she's working class in this film anyway.
Yeah, and often he will cast her that way. Not so much in Through a Glass Darkly.
Right.
More frequently, she will be someone with a kind of proletarian job.
So in a way, this seems like his Blue Angel as well. And not just for the fact that he discovered a woman he became sexually obsessed with.
True, I guess you could say that. Although she's a little bit more...
Well, with a lot more nature. Blue Angel with a lot more nature.
And a lot less insolence. I mean, at the end, she's very frustrated and starts throwing insults, but she's not mocking.
She actually has an affair while he goes away and he discovers her in bed with another man. That's worse than insolence.
I know, but she's not, like, making fun of him throughout the movie.
That's true. I mean, he is her own age, so that helps.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, yeah, it's a very different...
Well, I mean, I should explain what I mean by saying that, which is that the movie presents her as being a sensualist who lives for the moment and who isn't going to let any man tie her down to convention and prevent her from doing so, and it views her in a way that is ambiguous, that on the one hand it seems to completely throw her under the bus as a character, and on the other hand it seems to not judge her, so I'm not sure. It's very ambiguous and ambivalent.
I think to ground our discussion, we need to talk about Ingmar Bergman, at this point anyway, his rampant gender essentialism. I mean, that's what this movie suffers from, or benefits from, or whatever you want to call it. This is the engine of the movie.
Well, later on he starts getting away from that a little bit, in that when his actresses become so important to him as masks, as personae, that ultimate existential subjective truths are spoken through them, right? And gender doesn't matter as much as it used to.
Yeah, well, that's what I'm saying. At this point, this one is, I do feel like going almost whole hog with that idea of gender and just sort of saying, you know, this is...
Well, she's not very nurturing, though. Certainly not. And even this write-up that I found makes an odd mistake, given that this person seems highly familiar with the movie, by saying that for Bergman, the point at which the woman has a child is a point of disruption in the relationship. He implies that it's because she puts the child before the marriage. And that's not at all what happens in this movie.
It is the point of disruption, but it's
Yes.
because she's annoyed by the child. I'm not saying that he's projecting every gender stereotype onto her, but he is saying...
Men and women are fundamentally unalike, I guess.
And that a woman is just a natural being outside of, you know, the history of philosophy and thought. And the man is... Even if he's just a guy that packs crates at that entrepot, he is on track to becoming an engineer and a deep thinker, and he's troubled by all of this.
Right, and that might be why Godard liked this movie so much. And also something that Woody Allen took away from it as well.
Yeah, maybe. I thought it was fascinating to watch.
Yeah.
But these ideas, if you blow them up beyond the two characters, obviously, they're very bad ideas about what people are like.
Now, this did not... Nothing about this film was what I was expecting, given that its reputation is just that it was re-released in the United States as an exploitation movie, and it kind of stuck to Bergman. Critics who want to lower Bergman in the canon so that other filmmakers can be elevated point to his reputation, beginning with this movie, as an art house director who gets a big name. I guess David Lynch would be a later example, because his movies have a lot of sex in them.
Swedish erotica.
But of course, there's barely any of that in this movie at all. There's like a butt shot, which Bresson does too. And then and Bresson has no reputation like that.
No.
There is not even a butt, not even a nice woman's butt can attract casual art film goers to a late Bresson movie. And there's some sexy cleavage shots, and that's about it. It was much tamer than I was expecting from its reputation.
Sure, but if you put it in the context of an American art house...
Well, yeah, this is way before even, like, Psycho.
Yeah.
In terms of getting glimpses of nudity on the screen.
Right, yeah. So I guess there might have been people that went to see it and enjoyed it just for that reason. But...
Apparently there were quite a lot of people who at least went to see it for that reason.
And then they probably appreciated the brutal lesson that these characters learned. If they're taking that kind of prurient interest in it, they probably also like to see people punished for their transgressions outside of marriage.
Well, shall we actually get into talking about what happens in the film? So she starts out as a kind of manic pixie dream girl, and then she turns into a manic pixie nightmare girl. She just approaches him in a cafe. Well, first of all, there's a bunch of nature shots, because as I said, nature is very important in this film. Then we just get a scene of these two working class people in a cafe, and she approaches him and is very forward and basically asks him on a date.
Yeah.
Premise that you talked about with After Hours, where a man is punished for wanting to get laid by an extra sexy woman.
He goes in for a coffee, he's depressed, he hates his job, he just wants a tiny little break, and I guess he's always hoping someone will just come up to him and change his life. And yeah, she does. She decides that today that's what she feels like doing. They know of each other, or he knows of her, because she says, you know where I work, and he says yes. So he's obviously seen her around. And maybe she's noticed him before too, maybe not. We're not sure. They make a date to go to the movies. She asks him for a light, and it takes him several tries to
and it turns out that's not just a nice bit of business, it's representative of their relationship.
Yeah.
But she patiently waits for the light to come.
She does.
To come.
Yes. And they go to the cinema. She's a woman of the people. She is deeply immersed in this cheesy melodrama, whatever it is
Looks
they're
like
watching.
It's a Hollywood melodrama, a dream girl.
He is just sort of staring off into space while this is playing. She is all in tears. Then they take a stroll, and she is yammering away. He's not really listening to her.
Even here, we could see warning signs if we were so inclined. The fact that she thinks her life ought to be like a Hollywood movie and notices a blouse in a window that she admires as they're walking along. But she seems so fun and down to earth at this point that it's hard to take these things. You know, I think in a lot of ways, Harriet Andersson transcends this role.
Oh yeah, of course she
Until
does.
she just has nothing left that she can play at the end.
An amazing actress. One of my very favorites. This is obviously not the best role she ever got, but she makes the most of it. And she does make her very lovable. And you understand how, despite their impasse, their seeming impasse, this turns out to be a great date anyway.
She does seem to genuinely love him until the reality of their lives gets way too frustrating. She doesn't marry anybody else.
No.
And she doesn't run away with anybody else, so she obviously loves this guy the most to date. And he seems to still love her at the end of the movie.
Oh yeah, but we're getting way ahead of ourselves and talking about just this one date.
Yeah,
right?
I know. I can't help but look at the film as a whole.
They're not paying attention to each other on their walk home, which is, it should be a warning sign. But then they get there and they have like a great kiss goodbye, and that just erases everything else. Even the fact that he's about to get attacked by this neighborhood tough that used to date her. Even that can't weigh the scale down on the negative side of things.
Right.
He goes home with a song in his heart and great hope.
And a punch in his eye.
Yeah, but he's okay. He's fine. We get a glance at their home lives during this interval.
As they later say, they have opposite problems.
He comes from a middle-class family where his mother died a long time ago, and the dad is basically a shell with very bad health problems. He just hasn't really been present at all.
And so he lives in a big empty house, and the other presence in it occasionally is his aunt, who is very domestically oriented and likes to clean everything a lot.
Very orderly. Everything must be in its place. And over at Harriet Andersson's house, there's just a million kids, and a drunken dad, and a very put-upon mom.
I don't understand why there's such an age gap between her and the other kids. I thought maybe this would be a second marriage, but it turns out that's not the case.
Yeah, I just think it's more fun to have lots of little kids creating havoc. In the real world, I'm not sure that this is...
Possibly the mother had 7 miscarriages.
Well, that's possible,
and infants dying.
If you want to create fan fiction, then some pretty grim fan fiction, but yes.
Well, it's a grim movie.
It is.
So she can't get a moment's peace. All she wants to do, she's kind of like the other daughter in Cloudcap Star. All she wants to do is read movie magazines and have some peace and quiet. She just can't get a moment of that in this household where literally everybody sleeps in one room.
Yeah, and when she goes to work, she can't even just find some way to immerse herself in that because people are grabbing her.
She's
constantly
being sexually harassed, and she seems to have, possibly for that reason, tried out dating every single one of these guys and found them unsatisfactory.
No, they're terrible people.
She says constantly that she likes this protagonist. What the heck are their names anyway?
Well, her name is Monika.
Yeah, well, that's true, isn't it? This is how much I don't pay attention to names in movies. I don't even think it's... Harry! She constantly mentions that she likes Harry because he's not like the others. He's sweet and gentle, and we learned that is in fact true.
A very quiet boy. And
very maternal.
Yeah. And they both have these terrible jobs, and this is a great little aspect of the film. Pretty clear-eyed view of blue-collar existence.
That you don't usually attribute to Ingmar Bergman.
No, that's not his chosen subject most of the time, right?
It's not Fanny and Alexander.
No, so here, his job, he's just getting screamed at constantly, and if he makes any mistakes, well, I mean...
And he's a stockist and an order filler.
It's a ceramics company or something?
For a China company, China and glassware, which seems like a Bugs Bunny job. It's like you're just going to be constantly breaking things.
Yeah, he's really set up. The deck is stacked against him. We see several mishaps, and we see the way he's treated, and obviously that just gets on his nerves more and more. Over at her place at the grocery, well, it's the same kind of job, maybe with fewer possibilities of breaking things, but just as many different bosses yelling at you, but with the extra problem of getting your breasts grabbed and your ass grabbed constantly. It's not a shock to anyone watching. It feels very liberating when they both wind up quitting their jobs. So she does it first.
The breaking point for her comes when... It's an interesting scene tonally. Her father comes home and he's drunk as he always is, but he seems like a very jolly drunk.
Well, that scene really throws you a curve, right? It goes all over the place.
He seems like a very jolly drunk who has remembered his poor wife's, like their anniversary, 25-year anniversary, or 20 years or something like that. And she's grubbing away at the washboard as she does all day long every day. And he comes home and he's like, I bought a cake, I bought a bottle, we're going to do a little dance. She seems pleased that this is all happening. It all seems very jolly, although he does put the light out.
Well, he lifts her clumsily and breaks the light bulb above her head, yes.
Because he's drunk. But then he decides it's going to be like Christmas. So this all seems very sweet, really, within the terms of working class tropes.
Well, yeah, it seems like A Tree Grows in Brooklyn or something like that.
But Monika can't handle this. This is driving her crazy because he's drunk and acting like a lunatic, as usual. And so she just throws a monkey wrench in their nice little scene.
Yeah, she calls him
with her crabbiness. And she is very crabby throughout the movie.
Yeah.
She's never pleased with what's happening. And because he's drunk, he flies at her. And he starts hitting her. It doesn't seem like much of a brutal beating.
No, but still.
But she doesn't want to put up with it.
No, and I wouldn't either.
And she's been looking for a reason to get out of there. Anyway, she's way older, as I said, than the other kids. She's living in this tiny place. This is not a feasible life for her anymore. She needs to get married. Needs to get out of here. But it's not marriage that she proposes to, not immediately, to Harry.
No, she runs over to his house, and he's basically alone there because his dad is in the hospital. His aunt is lurking around, taking care of the place, so he can't have her in. He has to take her over to the family's boat and set her up there.
We didn't mention that the very first time they meet, she asks him to run away with her.
She does. This is her dream.
A little bit Huck Finnish. She's Huck Finn.
Yeah, they're halfway there at this point, but he's still trying to keep a toehold on the quotidian world. He does sleep there overnight with her, and we see the boat rock a little bit, so something is happening down there.
Don't know what.
But he goes to work the next day. Unfortunately, he oversleeps. The alarm doesn't quite work the way he wants. And when he gets to work, well, he gets screamed at all over again. And he's no longer willing to take this. He's seen the example of Monika.
They don't actually want to fire him.
No.
They have a lot of orders they need to fill. But he says he quits because she said she quit her job.
Yeah, she showed the way. She is the liberator. And he's like, well, fuck it. I tried to come to work. You don't want me? Give me my vacation and I'll leave.
And it's also interesting the way the movie portrays the property owners and the business owners, the upper bourgeoisie, because they are not brutal to him. They say, okay, all right, fine, we'll let you go without a week's notice. We won't give you pay, but we have to give him his vacation pay and give him a reference.
Yeah.
So it's not exaggerated in its portrayal of how shitty working life is. It's just shitty because it's shitty, not necessarily because people are working really hard to make it shitty.
No, it's not that well, at Monika's job, they are working pretty hard to make it extra annoying to her. But no, I guess Harry, he's just got the same lot as everyone else. There's just a bunch of people above him asking him to be quicker quicker and make fewer mistakes, and it's really aggravating.
Yes.
So they get on the boat and sail away.
Yeah, this movie is the equivalent of that line in Still Ill, back when Morrissey was good, that I liked so much when I was 16. If you must go to work tomorrow, well, if I were you, I wouldn't bother.
I've had those feelings many times, and sometimes in my 20s, I did just decide not to bother, and I didn't have a boat, unfortunately.
So they take off on their raft with more sex.
A much more nicely stocked raft. They've got all the essentials on there seems like for weeks. You know, they've got supplies, food.
Well, he just brings a bunch of stuff from his house.
All the camping stuff. They can cook food. This is going to be a nice summer.
That's the setup.
It sure starts out wonderfully. I mean, it takes a while before things start to go bad. They're just having a great time.
As long as Monika is getting what she wants, which is food and freedom, she's wonderful to be with.
Yeah, exactly. If only the world would really accommodate that indefinitely, then this pairing could have worked.
Absolutely. They seem perfect for each other. There seems to be perfect harmony.
Yeah, he just is willing to go along with any of her manic whims. It's when she gets depressive that he's not sure what to do about it.
Well, there isn't anything he can do about it since they can't go on holiday forever. The whole middle section of this film is just scenes of them, and her in particular, frolicking.
Yeah.
Walking around in state of undress or semi-dress, including really big granny panties.
Yeah.
I guess that's part of the Swedish eroticism. She has a nice big fanny for them. She fills everything out very well.
Sure, I guess you could think of this as early body positivity.
Well, no.
Because people are calling her fat all through the movie. Obviously,
she has a very small waist. This woman is, like, insanely nicely proportioned.
Yeah,
I'm
she's
very jealous.
One of the best looking women who's ever been on film. At the same time...
Well, she is complaining about not being able to get into... But then it turns out she's pregnant.
Yeah, but...
That's why she's put on weight.
No, but before that, her brother, those little kids around the house, call her tubby. All the guys at her work call her fat, and that's why they want to pinch her. So
well, I think they're looking at a character that is written and not actually looking at Harriet Andersson.
That is part of the text of this film, that she is bigger than...
I don't know, maybe Bergman was creating a new erotic ideal for all I know. Maybe the Swedish ideal at that time was smaller.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. It seems like it's a very pointed intervention in discourse around female beauty.
She's not half as tubby as Marlene Dietrich in The Blue Angels. They had to put her on a soda cracker diet when she went to Hollywood, even to get her down to Morocco size.
The movie is definitely exhibiting her as a beautiful woman under unusual circumstances. Like you say, that outfit.
Yes, at one point she's got granny panties and 2 sweaters on.
Yeah.
And she's, like, wandering around on the rocks by the sea that way.
It's like a Steve Bannon outfit. Doesn't he wear cargo shorts and extra layers of
I don't know anything about the erotic fashions of Steve Bannon.
Anyway, she looks much better than Steve Bannon.
Lord.
Really, everything's going pretty well until...
Well, the first problem they encounter is this is the same ex-boyfriend?
Yeah.
And he is also the one she ends up sleeping with later.
Yes.
Okay.
What's his name? It starts with an L.
Lely or something?
Yeah. He obviously has nothing else to do that summer either, so he has stalked after them, or did he just stumble upon them? Who knows? But he finds them. He's camped out not far from where they are.
He just can't bear the fact that they're having such a good time.
While they're cooking something, he seizes the opportunity to set fire to their boat and throw a lot of their supplies into the ocean.
Then they come back, and the guys get into a big fight, and Harry has the worst of it until Monika intervenes with a pot.
That's the turning point. She gives him a really good conk in the head, and
she's willing to kill him.
She is, yeah. She's
an amoral, natural creature, and this is her response to this guy being a really bad shit. I mean, he is just acting out of pure spiteful destruction.
Yeah, he is terrible, and exactly as you say, she doesn't draw the line at killing. She hefts an oar and seems like she's about to cave his head in.
Yep.
But Harry stops her, but that's after Harry gets a bunch of punches in, so he can restore his sense of manhood.
And then almost in a film noir or realm of the senses way, she's right back to lustily kissing Harry after this incident of violence.
Yes, like gun crazy. That hurdle is successfully cleared. Layla goes away. maybe forever, maybe not. Maybe he'll be back. They have very diminished supplies, and I guess that does play into the next problem that they encounter.
The downhill descent here.
Yeah. She is pregnant.
Which she mentions in an ultra-casual way. Harriet Andersson really is very charming in this movie.
Yeah,
her deliveries are amazing.
He just goes with it, and he knows that this is a problem that they're going to have to think hard about how to solve, but he never wants to shirk his share of the responsibility. He starts thinking about, well, I'll become an engineer. I'll go to night school, and I'll make a nice living for us. We'll get a house, and she starts joining him in the imagination of the plan.
Yeah, well, she says, it'll be great, I will look after this baby, and I'll never work. But it turns out that the emphasis for her is on never work.
Right, including never working on taking care of the baby.
That is the part of the fantasy that she's actually enjoying.
In the meantime, they're going to stay out on their sojourn as long as they can, because they don't want to go back to that town, especially Monika does not want to go back to that town. But they start running out of food, and all they've got at a certain point is just mushrooms, variations of mushrooms, which sounds pretty good to me, actually. Although
you honestly can't only live on mushrooms, especially if you're pregnant.
Not enough calories, for sure, but delicious. I can't believe she would want to throw them overboard. They're always good. You just need something else to go with the mushrooms. And she suggests that they go raid a local farm and orchard. He doesn't want to do that because they could get caught and could get into serious legal difficulties, but she will not accept his no. She says, well, I'm going with you or without you, so you have to decide. Obviously, I guess he figures he could try to control her if he goes with her. She is an unstoppable force. When they get there, we basically lose track of him, and we just see Monika. She forges ahead. She's looking for something she can grab, something really nutritious.
She goes down into the cellar to get those potatoes.
Yeah, so she doesn't stick to the orchard. She doesn't just grab a few apples out of trees. She goes right into someone's
potatoes
house.
You can live on. The Irish know this.
Yeah.
Potatoes, but not apples. You can't just live on apples.
No.
Not humans.
As Harry predicted, there are people around, and she gets caught by the mistress of the house. She gets dragged back there by this couple, because the man comes along as well.
This scene is, so hilarious.
It really is. She's got a big slab of meat.
Well, I mean, they're having dinner, so they serve this roast, and then they tell her that they're going to put her in jail, which seems fucking ridiculous because they can see she's hungry, and this is the problem. They can see it so much that they tell her to sit down and have dinner with them.
Yeah.
But they're still going to put her in jail, so obviously she just spits at them all, and then grabs the roast and runs.
It's an incredible progression, because you don't know exactly how to feel about these people. Obviously, instinctively, you hate them because they're trying to clamp down on our heroine. But on the other hand, you start to want to give them a bit of the benefit of the doubt. Maybe they're like, well, she's a minor. She probably needs her family or something. Who knows?
Yes, but you think that's why they're calling the police? Because she needs her family?
Well, that's probably what would happen to her if she's a minor. She wouldn't go to prison. She would be taken back to her family. On the other hand, who knows what they'll do with her, right? And this family, you can't ever get around to thinking that they're really thoughtful people.
Well, they never say to her, who are your parents?
They ask her what her name is, and she won't tell them. She spits at them, right?
I don't find them that sympathetic.
No, but they didn't have to offer her the food. They're not just being complete Dickens villains.
But I said that.
Yeah.
But she's being, absolutely recalcitrant, way beyond Huck Finn levels of recalcitrant.
The daughter of the house sits down next to her and tries to talk to her. She seems almost to be flirting with her a little bit.
I didn't. That's your fantasy, man. That's your fantasy.
Anyway, the dad...
But then she backs away in terror when Harriet Andersson... You can see here, the beginning of the Cries and Whispers performance that otherwise seems like a polar opposite.
Exactly.
How this could turn into a horror performance.
It could. And the dad... This is the most exciting thing that's happened to him in months, so he says he has to go get a beer, and while he's doing that, Harriet Andersson grabs the meat and runs, eating it while she runs. It's amazing. So the bourgeois family is chasing after her, fugitive from a chain gang montage, as she rambles through the woods looking for Harry, looking for her escape, but she
stops now and then to gnaw on the roast.
She's very hungry.
Yeah. And then it kind of turns lyrical.
On the shore.
Yeah, but she's in the grasses.
It's the same year, isn't it, as Night of the Hunter? It's got kind of that feel to it.
Oh, is it the same year? Because I thought of that at the time, and then I forgot.
There's the owl, there's the spider web.
Exactly the same, really, and yeah. Nature lyricism. No, Night of the Hunter is after.
Okay, Charles Laughton swiped this, maybe.
Or, yeah, whoever, a specific person did that design for him. Or maybe he did storyboard it. I actually can't remember if his art designer on the movie came up with that sequence or if he did. It feels like somebody saw this movie.
Yeah, it's an elaboration upon this anyway, because there's so many more creatures that appear on the riverside.
But that's also about two people, a boy and a girl, who get on a Huck Finn raft and drift away from things that are bothering them.
Yeah, it feels like there's some kind of a relationship.
For 100%. Has anyone talked about this before?
Harry does appear eventually, and she scolds him for not being right on the spot, and he says, well, I told you not to even do what you just did. And they have a bit of a tiff there, but she gets on the boat and they do escape. She does not go to jail.
Well, she does have a crying fit.
Yeah.
About how she doesn't want to go back, but she does want to go back, basically.
Yeah, it's a no-win situation.
And he just says, we had our summer, but the summer's over. Got to go back to reality. You're having a baby. And she has just a temper tantrum because she's not happy with reality at all.
No, she hates going back to that place. She also hates being out on a boat with no meat.
And she does, at this point, start blaming him for not being a better provider.
Yeah, like, how can he be a provider? Yeah.
She doesn't make any sense. She's not supposed to make any sense.
No.
She has, in fact, chosen him not because he's some kind of caveman, but even that doesn't make sense because we see that if she would have a little patience, he would be a very good provider.
She can't plan ahead.
Lives in the moment.
This is not boding well, but I guess for a little while you can be excused for continuing to be hopeful, right? Because they go back to the city. Man, the dad has been in the hospital for 6 months. He missed all of this. He never appears again. It's the aunt that is the parental stand-in. We never see her parents again. And she takes them to a magistrate and says, look, they're 18, they want to get married, and in this case, I think we should allow it to happen because they're going to have a baby, and so it is done. The scene of the birth is quite joyful.
Yeah, he gives her flowers. They both say they're okay with this being a girl. He wants to call it Monika. She doesn't like that. She hates her name.
June. She wants June. He calls the baby June Monika, or Monika June.
She gives a really nice offhand sniff to those flowers, and then he looks at the new baby through the window, and for a second there it looks like we're having some kind of Borzagian resolution where, like the end of Little Man, What Now? Now he's going to work very hard and
she's going to be transfigured by motherhood.
Yes.
But no. That's the last happy moment in this film.
Yep. Well, I don't know, the ending's kind of happy. He seems like he's going to be okay. He's had an experience and he's left with a baby, but he seems like he's going to be okay with that.
Okay, but it's the last happy moment between them.
Absolutely.
The film cuts right from that beautiful scene to a sleepless night, a crying baby.
But you still think that, okay, so they have to face the reality of what having a child is like, but every couple goes through this, and it's terrible, but they work through it somehow.
Yeah, this turns into, we only see him. We don't see her at all for a while. He's sleeping on a couch, and he keeps trying to quiet the baby down. It feels like, I don't know, maybe she's away somewhere. Like, she's not involved in this at all.
She is away somewhere, yeah. But she's also right there.
That takes 10 minutes to be revealed, and he's trying to study.
It basically turns into Woman of the Year at this point.
She's just the worst mother of all time.
Yep. She goes right under the bus. There's no nuance.
None at all. Then again, that's part of the conception of this film. If she's not interested in something, she will not participate at all. She won't make a half-hearted effort. She just won't do it.
He's obviously trying to get some sleep because we see that not only is he working, now at a better job with a very nice supervisor.
This is a bit Borzagian.
Looks like he has a bright future, but he's also studying at night, and he also has infinite patience for his wife refusing to acknowledge any of this by helping with the child at night. Next thing we see is that he is going away for a week, and he has arranged that she will not have to look after the child during that time.
Yeah. So this is an important part of his apprenticeship, presumably. It's going to be valuable experience, and sure enough, at the end of the engagement, wherever they were, we hear that the rest of the crew is ready to recommend him for a full-time position. It would be a major step up in his career.
And there is just no acknowledgement in this film that there is any side to her story at all. It may seem patently unfair if a man is earning the income that you're living on to want him to help when he comes home from work with the child, but looking after a child by yourself, a newborn, is a fucking nightmare. I remember when I was 10 and my mother had a baby, and every day I would get home from school, I would be utterly exhausted, and I'd be like Harriet, and I would just want everybody to leave me alone. I don't want to do another thing for another person that another person tells me to do for the rest of the night, and I would be handed this baby by my mother telling me, I haven't even had a chance to have a shower today. Take this goddamn baby. But they don't have a child. I'm sure Harriet's been doing that her whole life, but they don't have a child to help out.
If it was a different movie, a different vision, we could have seen some scenes of her being beaten down by this experience of trying to raise the child while he's away.
It's implied, but
I'm not sure if it's implied.
You don't even think it's implied?
No, I feel like her job was done as soon as she gave birth. That's the way the movie makes it feel, right? Because it cuts out any scene of her ever even interacting with the baby.
Yeah, and she seemed perfectly happy when she had it.
Yeah, and that was hard work, and now it's his job. Now it's his problem. And if he can't be there, then it's his aunt's problem, because it is not Monika's problem.
She seems like a psychopath.
They tell the aunt that Monika has a job, and that's why she can't take care of the baby, and that is the only reason that the aunt agrees to it.
Did I just call her Harriet the whole time?
Yeah.
Did. Well,
that's the actress's name.
They have
that's
blended
fine.
in my mind.
There's Harriet and Harry. Harry's a character, Harriet is an actress. But as soon as he leaves, you're like, oh no, is what I think is going to happen, is that what's going to happen? And yes, it is. She goes out on the town. We see her getting ready.
Very Sternbergian, even though he never does anything like this, but it feels that sort of emotional quality where she just... Actually, the whole ending, the whole falling in love again sequence at the end of The Blue Angel where she's singing and looking at the audience, I guess that's what I'm thinking of. The scene where Monika turns and looks straight at the camera for a big, long look.
Well, that, I think, is what the movie is doing, right? At the end, it's giving us two existential portraits of our characters. They've been separated from each other again. They're no longer really involved with each other, even if at this point in the film they're still married. But this is what she is in her essence. She wants to go out and have a good time. And she has high animal spirits. And we also get a counterpart shot of Harry.
But she really isn't that in her essence, because in her essence, if she could get away from reality, like I said, you know, to a world where she could just be in nature all of the time, it's not like screwing every man and...
No, not at all.
Drinking and dancing. She doesn't need any of that. And having things bought for her. She doesn't need any of that. She needs food and freedom. Like I said, that's it.
But that is what I'm talking about. That shot of her, it's animal spirits. This idea of being completely unconstrained. It's not that she needs anything in particular to happen. It's just this idea of going out and having whatever kind of fun time she wants to. She certainly doesn't want to be pawed by just anyone. We saw that she hated that. But she is this elemental force.
And that also does go with the Sternberg parallel, even though they're expressed in very different ways. That's kind of like the bottled essence of how he sees this Dietrich character that then becomes much more interesting in the American films that he makes with her. The idea of a woman who has to be utterly unconstrained in every way.
Yeah. And when we see that extended character shot of Harry later, he is deeply interior, right? He is wrestling.
Is that the one? He's not holding the baby, is he?
Yeah.
He is holding the baby.
Yeah, so he's thinking about
how he's going to provide
assembling
for little
a life.
Monika.
Yeah, putting together a life that is going to work for himself and his shortened family here.
and he has insisted, this is one area where he's overridden her, he has insisted that this child is going to be called Monika.
June is now Monika, out of the picture.
This is a Monika he can control, this little Monika.
That's a good point, right? Despite the fact that it's easy to see this as...
he's all good and she's all bad?
Yeah, the other way to look at it is that his rage for epistemic control is part of what is inflaming her desire to get out of there.
Yes, because he really does have all of this planned step by step, you know?
Yeah, so he's just sort of slotted her in.
It never throws him. It never throws. So yes, he has this life plan, and she is going to be a puzzle piece that he's going to make fit.
Yeah, she just refuses, ultimately. That is fantastic stuff. The only problem with this is if you try to make this a statement about gender writ large. There's no reason to do that. There's no need for that. But these two characters as characters, it works really well to have this situation explode between them.
Yeah, because it really is, you can almost see it as chamber drama with just two personalities, as you say, that in their essence coming together are going to create conflict just like Persona.
Yeah, it's a nice trial run for Persona in a way.
And that is about a person, the nurse in that instance, who wants to control another person who will not be controlled. Because the essence of another person is that you can't control them. Hey, we've hit on something there.
Sure, that's intersubjectivity.
That is Bergman's subject.
Too much slippage there
So
for master plans.
If you don't, although clearly a lot of filmmakers who love this movie did, but if you don't read it in terms of gender, it is just the usual Bergman struggle between two subjects.
Yeah, two very forceful subjects who cannot ultimately coexist. There has to be some sort of victory or just separation. And in this case, it's separation. Monika goes off to do something else. We have no idea what. And Harry seems pretty settled on the course that he's been planning all along. He just won't have Monika. He'll just have little Monika.
Exactly.
It was an excellent film.
Yeah.
I'm happy we watched it finally. We missed it when it showed at the Bergman retrospective.
And I'm glad you scheduled this, because given the film's reputation, I probably would never have bothered. A reputation of the film being about nothing except Harriet Andersson's breasts.
Right. Well, no, there's a lot more to it than that.
Yes. Although that is a nice shot.
Onward to A Summer Place.
So I did quite a bit of Wikipedia research while we were having our break between watching and recording. What did you know about this movie, Dave?
I saw it once a long time ago.
That's it. But you knew something about Delmer Daves.
I've always enjoyed the films that I've seen by Delmer Daves, and he is getting more and more of a reputation, I find, these days. In the 40s, he did Dark Passage, which is
an excellent movie.
Yeah, always loved it. He did The Pride of the Marines, which is a quite extraordinary John Garfield film. He also did Hollywood Canteen.
Yeah, that was fun.
It's a very lovable film, and he was a screenwriter. He wrote Love Affair.
Yeah, so quite a lot of range. As I was researching him, he was a Warner Brothers director, seemingly throughout his career. What he was doing, for the most part in the 50s, were endless westerns.
Yeah, 3:10 to Yuma is the most famous one.
But for some reason that I can't find any account of it on the internet, apparently Warner's decided to get him to launch the career of Troy Donahue. He made 3 movies like this, whose intent was to launch the career of Troy Donahue. They were replacing Tab Hunter, and there's quite a backstory to this. So do you know about Henry Wilson?
No.
So Henry Wilson was an agent.
Oh, okay. He's the agent that had all the young boys.
He's the hashtag MeToo agent.
Right, okay. I just didn't know his name.
Of closeted gay Hollywood. So he was Rock Hudson's agent, Guy Madison, Tab Hunter, and Troy Donahue, among many others. Some of his finds were gay men themselves, some weren't, but the agent version of the casting couch was in place for them regardless.
Okay.
And it sounds like, in addition to that, he had to do such things as, the reason, according to this Wikipedia entry, Tab Hunter's career ended was that Rock Hudson was going to be exposed by a gossip magazine as gay. So Wilson sold out Tab Hunter instead, and someone else, I can't find it now.
Rory Calhoun.
Rory Calhoun? Oh,
he was also in a Delmer Daves movie, The Red House.
So sold out Rory Calhoun and Tab Hunter because the two of them together were worth less than a Rock Hudson, apparently.
Well, that's probably true, yeah.
Well, if you're going to do that kind of calculus.
Well, yeah, of course. I'm not saying that it's correct to do so.
Yeah, so Tab Hunter was exposed as gay, and Rock Hudson was not.
Right. Donahue steps into the Tab Hunter slot.
Yeah, and Warner's asked Delmer Daves to oversee that. So he did 3 Cirque-type Circus melodramas.
Yeah, this is the only one I've ever seen. I'm interested in the other 2.
I 100% want to see all 3 of them now, although Troy Donahue is not the feature.
Of this one, no, but it's a great movie.
Oh, yeah, it was very good. Do you know who wrote the novel that it was based on?
No.
Sloan Wilson, do you know who that is?
No, I know the name, but I don't know.
The man with the gray flannel suit.
Oh, okay, that makes sense.
It makes complete sense why this movie is so heavy-handed, didactic, and Freudian, trying to teach the Hollywood audience a lesson about sexual mores. And it too was an enormous, whether because of that or despite it, like Man with the Flannel Suit, this was an enormous hit.
And that song was a huge, huge hit. The theme
Yes,
from A
it
Summer
was.
Place,
Yes.
which is wonderful.
Max Steiner.
Yeah. And
Going strong after all these years for Warner Brothers.
the Percy Faith Orchestra version of it went to #1, I believe, on the hit parade.
So yeah, I definitely want to see these other Delmer Daves movies now. I would like us to do Sandra Dee.
Sandra Dee as a full filmography?
An acteur.
Okay.
Now, let me make my case for this. So she, like many of our actresses, as we've talked about often in discussing that series, had a very tragic life and was a very, mentally unstable person, and that is why, or part of the reason why, her filmography is so manageable. We're gonna have to cut out some of the later films she did after the mid-60s, because she did some films that look like I don't ever want to see them in my life. Only a handful, but I still don't want to see them. But that's fine, because we've also got incomplete filmography of several actresses, and with Jean Arthur we're going to have to trim the beginning of her career.
Sure.
So it still works. I would also like us to be the only podcast who's given equal consideration to the careers of Sandra Dee and Daniel Day-Lewis. And also, if we do it, I will no longer have any reason to object to you doing Priscilla Lane.
Oh, good.
Although we'd have to decide in that case whether we're doing Priscilla Lane or John Garfield.
This is a long-term project. This is going to unfold over many years.
This is only my second Sandra Dee movie, at least that I've watched as an adult, and that I remember watching, but I always thought she was great in Imitation of Life. I always thought that she should be lumped together with the Juanita Moore and Susan Conner side of things, rather than with the wooden or plastic or whatever you want to call it, Lana Turner and John Gavin side of the equation. I always thought she was wonderful in her scenes with Susan Conner, also in her scenes with John Gavin, who, by the way, she was romantically paired with later.
Well, of course.
And like, our poor Clara Bow, she just came from a terrible background. She was a young teen model. She was sexually abused by her mother's husband, not her father, but by her stepfather. And
It's a pity Lana Turner couldn't have killed that guy too.
She became anorexic, struggled with that and with alcoholism, and
married Bobby Darin. That didn't help.
And died in her early 60s of kidney failure, and of course was not, like Troy Donahue, was not able to make a shift to adult roles from her ingenue image. She's no Clara Bow in terms of acting ability or on-screen charisma, but she is always interesting, and she's interesting for good reason, because she was fucked in the head.
Yeah. I saw a Night Gallery episode from the 70s, so she's in her 30s at that point. She does look totally different, but she looks incredible.
She was
and
a
it's
very
a great
beautiful woman.
Episode. I really enjoyed it, but obviously it didn't lead to anything.
Well, she made the occasional TV appearance, but her film career was not doing well after the 60s.
Yeah, I don't think you went to Night Gallery to rejuvenate your career, I guess, but it was also Rod Serling on the downside, so...
She apparently, I guess she wanted to keep working.
Well, we can do her at some point. We'll put her on the list.
And she is kind of the acting powerhouse of this movie, because Troy Donahue is a piece of Nazi-looking driftwood.
He does what he's asked to do in this film. He's sympathetic, I find.
Yeah, I guess, I don't know, like a well-trained dog or something. He does what he's asked to do.
Yeah, he's not someone that you'd want to do an acteur cast on, but I don't think that he drags the movie down in any way.
No, he doesn't. He's obviously capable of being effectively directed. It's not a Keanu Reeves in Bram Stoker's Dracula situation.
Well, that works for its own reason. So shall we set this film up?
Sure.
We get shots of nature as well to begin this one, the first of many parallels between our two summer films. But this one is in brilliant Technicolor. And as you say, it is definitely harking back to the Cirque film. It's trying to pick up the torch from Cirque, who had quit Hollywood at this point.
But it is a slightly different flavor. Cirque never gets this Freudian.
No, I don't think that it really winds up being like a Cirque film, but it definitely announces itself to audiences as, hey, you loved Cirque movies. Well, this looks like it's going to be a Cirque movie.
And although Ross Hunter did do many films with Sandra Dee, this is not one of them. It's not even a Ross Hunter film. It's a Warner's film.
Yeah, and Delmer Daves wrote, directed, and produced it. So, okay, you say he was told that he had to do this, but he definitely took ownership of it, clearly, because he didn't work with anyone. He just set it all up himself.
He decided, I want to know the backstory of this. He decided to make 3 auteur pieces with Troy Donahue in a genre that he never worked in before or after.
It's amazing. He gets some very competent actors in to help him with that. Dorothy McGuire is always welcome, and I think she does a very good job in this film.
Sure.
Arthur Kennedy is the actor's actor of the 1950s and early 60s. We've seen him in many things lately.
Sleazebag in this one too, although an interesting sleazebag.
Well, that's what he wound up specializing in, yeah. Although he could play total naifs as well, and anything in between. I mean, he really was a great actor, and he was ready to play anything, all the way up to the dad rapist in Peyton Place.
Who is this Richard Egan?
I don't know, but he's good.
Is he anybody?
He's better than John Gavin.
He's like a broader looking John Gavin. What the hell else did he do? Anything that we know? The doctor in Pollyanna. There isn't a dad. She's an orphan. Okay, I totally recognize him from that. I love Haley Mills, by the way. She's the other great teen actress of the 60s. I 100% remember him from Pollyanna, but basically not from any of these other movies that he was in.
He seems to have had a pretty decent star career. And he's, again, I think very good for this part. He does everything that's required of him in it.
It's really a movie for the women.
Yeah. I don't know the actress that plays Sandra Dee's mother.
Oh, I've seen her before. 100%. She looks so familiar. Let's find out. Constance Ford.
Oh, Home from the Hill.
Oh, I guess that's where we saw her. I don't know who she plays in Home from the Hill, but...
Oh, and she's back in Rome Adventure. That's another Delmer Daves, Troy Donahue film. So,
well, that's the only thing I could be remembering her from is Home from the Hill, which we saw at TIFF a few years ago.
So it's a tale of two families, ultimately.
It certainly is.
It's set all over the place.
It's longer than any Cirque movie that I can recall. It's a very long movie.
It's 2 hours and 10 minutes, yeah. And we start out... You could be forgiven when you start this movie for thinking, well, it's all going to take place in one summer. But no, it gets much more expansive than that. But it does spend a lot of time, at least the first half of the film, is on this island in New England, a summer resort. We see the preparations for the new season. Handyman is giving a new coat of paint to this inn.
That's the night watchman.
Yeah, well, he does a bunch of things.
Who turns out to be very snoopy.
Oh, he's gross. He's gross, for sure.
But I mean, it turns out to be metaphoric, this conversation that he's having with...
Arthur Kennedy.
Arthur Kennedy just tells him to slap a coat of paint on. All we need are appearances. We don't need, anything going on underneath them.
No, exactly.
Get it?
Night watchman / handyman says, back in the old days, they cared about quality. That's when he's talking to Troy Donahue.
Yeah, and it turns out that he would like everybody to behave themselves sexually, like in the old days, too.
He's one of these characters, like in a Dickens novel, who is like a class traitor or something. He's like a lower class guy who only has respect for the grandees of old who used to live stylishly.
He wants everyone, like a servant in a British movie, he wants everyone to keep up those standards.
Yeah, exactly. This guy's going to be a problem for sure, but there are problems all over the place.
Totally, this is 100 times messier than any family Cirque melodrama.
The owners of this house and resort, it's Arthur Kennedy and Dorothy McGuire. Their marriage is very strained. We can see that immediately.
Well, there's one spouse to blame in each of these marriages, and the wife is the worst.
Well, yeah, definitely. But yeah, we'll get to her. But Arthur Kennedy comes from very prestigious stock, and he has fallen in the world to the point where he now has to rent out their little mansion instead of just living in it and entertaining people for free. And we find it was due to stock market problems or something. We don't really find out exactly how he managed to lose their fortune, but he did. The first conversation between them, it really winds up being over this letter that they get.
Yeah, and because everyone knows how a melodrama works, or you should be educated in how a melodrama works. As soon as he says, we've got a letter from a guy who used to work here years ago, you know that they were lovers.
Yeah, well...
This is the man she's still in love with.
Yeah, her heart catches in her throat. You can see
Well,
that.
there's that too. That does help. The shot does help.
Yeah.
But even without it, you would have to know what was going to happen.
This guy, apparently, so 20 years ago, he was the lifeguard. A lower class lifeguard just brought on the hired help. And
her mother objected to their relationship, and so she didn't end up marrying him. It is implied that perhaps Oh, whoa, wait a minute. I guess I hope it's not implied.
No,
implied that Troy Donahue is his son.
No, it's not implied.
Well, she did call out his name when she was giving birth to him.
Yes, but that's because she loved him, not because he's actually the father. No, because that wouldn't work.
It is Peyton Place. Or Flowers in the Attic. It could be that too.
Arthur Kennedy reads the letter in its entirety, and it does reference the fact that Richard Egan is now a millionaire. He's a rags to riches story, and Arthur Kennedy doesn't want to hear anything about that. He doesn't want this guy on the island at all. He's going to refuse to rent them a room. Dorothy McGuire says, we can't be proud like that. We need the $5,400 that we're going to get from this guy. So
they give up their bedroom and they go and stay in the servant's cottage out back.
Yeah, so that they can pay for their son's college. And Arthur Kennedy's drunk already. With the first shot of him, he's looking out of a telescope on the beach and he's got a drink in his hand. And he never doesn't have a drink in his hand.
It's true. Unless he's so drunk that he can't actually hold it.
So that's the kind of guy he is. And Dorothy McGuire is a long-suffering wife. She's been dealing with this for 20 years. That is brutal.
We see the yacht and the appearances that they are trying to keep up on it.
This family also totally fucked up, staying together only for the child, who is Sandra Dee. And she comes out and looks through binoculars and sees there's a guy looking at her. So everyone's spying on everyone.
Yeah, but it turns out that this was love at first
binocular
sighting.
Yeah, no, this was kismet, right?
Yep.
They see each other long distance across an ocean and they love each other. And then
so
she has a weird talk with her dad.
So she's wearing, I can't remember what you call it, these kinds of summer trousers, a sweater.
Capri?
Yeah, there you go, capri pants and a sweater. So she's not very provocatively dressed. She's just a comfortably dressed teenager, but this doesn't make her mother happy at all anyway.
No, her mother wants her to be corseted.
She wants her to wear a binder, basically.
She totally flattened out.
Yeah.
So no one can ogle her curves.
Anyway, so this conversation she has with her dad before that conversation.
It's wild.
Well, it starts off the didactic themes of Freudian psychology and American relationship to sexuality.
It's pretty incredible, though, because the conversation is keyed on the insights that issue forth from her realizing that someone's been watching them.
Well, she's able to talk over everything sexual with her dad that nevertheless ultimately does not help her to understand her father's sexuality.
Well, no, because she's thinking about her own, that's all.
And that's it. She doesn't want to think about his. Ew.
No, not at all. Tells her dad that every once in a while when she's feeling naughty, she will leave her curtains open and undress in front of the window for the benefit of the boy next door.
Yeah, so it's
and he's like, well, that's fine, honey.
That's perfectly normal. Everyone feels like that. So that was, what was that movie with Kevin Spacey?
What, American Beauty?
Yes, that scene actually happens in American Beauty.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
No one tells their dad about it.
No.
Not even Kevin Spacey.
No.
Although he's got his own problems.
He sure does. This is a very understanding dad and a very not understanding mother.
Well, everybody in this movie seems to have, even the aunt.
Bela Bondi?
Yeah, looking great, by the way. Even Bela Bondi has read Freud, except for this wife who really needs to.
She really needs to. She also has preconceived notions, not only about what her daughter should wear, but about her husband. He's a millionaire with a yacht, so he needs to be wearing a skipper's cap. And he says, that's ridiculous. Everyone knows me as a proletarian lifeguard. I'm not going to go back putting on airs. That's the worst possible note to sound. And he throws the hat out the window.
And Sandra Dee is also like, during this conversation, Daddy, she says I bounce. Do I bounce?
Yeah, and he says, but in a really pleasant way.
And this actor is doing just an amazing job that I don't think every actor his age could manage of making none of this sound creepy.
Yeah, because it could easily start to sound like Ray Wise in Twin Peaks or something. But it doesn't.
Not even when they're in bed together talking about her naughty dreams.
Yeah, so he throws the corset out the window as well.
It's less incestuous than Late Spring.
So the stage is set. Pyrotechnics fly pretty quickly when they arrive. Dorothy McGuire begs off. She says she's sick. She goes to the gardener's quarters where they've moved for the summer so that they can give up their bedroom to these prestigious guests.
Their very lovely bedroom.
Yeah. No, the place is amazing. It is run down, though, as we find out. There are holes in the ceiling.
Because he won't pay for it to be fixed up because he's afraid it'll be condemned.
Yeah, exactly. Pretty great. the whole thing, the way it's all set up. I guess probably a lot of this is just brought straight out of the novel. I guess we'll never know. We're probably not going to read.
No, I don't think Sloane Wilson is on our list. No Fanny Hurst.
Or Lloyd C. Douglas. The powder keg is right there, and it won't take long for a match to be lit. The dinner conversation the first night gets pretty randy. I mean, that's all Arthur Kennedy talking about people swimming in the nude and just how the island brings out the Harriet Andersson in everyone. Mother is scandalized. Constance Ford just can't believe what she's hearing.
She's so flabbergasted that she even lets Troy Donahue sneak off with Sandra Dee.
Yeah, well, she's really taken off guard, right? Because she is a snob. She desperately wants to get in good with these swells.
But she also wants
to... But they're so cosmopolitan and jaded about sex that she can't handle it. And it's like she's a computer that short circuits because she doesn't know which of her prejudices to give way to, so she can't give way to either of them momentarily.
So they go wandering, the two kids, and Sandra Dee is very young in this movie, actually, the actress. She was born in 1942.
So 17.
But some sources say 1944.
Oh, really?
But anyway, I think she's supposed to be playing a 17-year-old.
Yeah, I guess so at this point, because they say later that they're 18 and 19.
Okay.
But that's after the summer. So maybe she's 17, who knows. They are immediately smitten with each other. We know that already. Then they say, as soon as they saw each other through the binoculars, they were in love, and they prove it by indulging in some kisses out there in the moonlight.
And they're both so lovely that you can't blame them.
Yeah, why not? They're just enjoying themselves.
They're like just genetically perfect American kids. So
Sure.
Other than Sandra Dee's terrible struggles with anorexia,
Right.
which already she's got these dark circles under the eyes that are intriguing.
Well, her mother's been nagging her nonstop her whole life, so that'll ruin your sleep, I would think. The worst possible thing happens, or one of the worst possible things. Actually, two. The night watchman sees them, and the mother sees them be seen by the night watchman. It's bad enough if the mother had seen them, but she knows that now everyone's gonna know.
Right.
Which is even worse.
Well, that's actually what she's really worried about.
Yeah, although she's not happy about just the fact of it either.
Mm-hmm.
But the fact that it's going to be bruited about is even worse.
So she starts going on to her husband about what a slut their daughter is, and ends up blaming his Swedish blood, and I swear that has to be a direct reference to Summer with Monica.
Yeah, the smoking gun, a vindication of my choice.
Relationship.
I knew it all along. There would be a direct connection between the two summer films. And yeah, he gives his speech about
his liberal, tolerant speech.
What she's against, which is
Everything.
everyone and everything. And yeah.
So all races, all ethnicities, sex and life are what she's against.
She's anti-life. There's really nothing much she's for except getting a country club membership, I guess.
Were they able to get a direct reference to, in the movie's terms, Negroes because of Imitation of Life, do you think? 59, was this becoming more common?
You could see a lot of things are happening in this film that shouldn't be happening under the code. There is a pregnancy, definitely sex before marriage.
That is actually said. Hey,
What?
I wasn't even thinking about that.
So the code is loosening by 1959 because, yeah.
Although Billy Wilder gets in trouble making Kiss Me Stupid with a double adultery that is part of a comedy in 1964. So you're hit and miss.
I think maybe because it's so crudely joking about it as well.
So
This
you
movie
had to watch your tone.
Yeah, this movie makes it seem serious, right? Like
Yeah.
it's a problem.
Yeah.
So they can actually have it as a plot point, I guess. Who knows? There were legalistic debates that occurred between the people making these movies and the studio representatives.
Well, always there were.
Yeah.
But again, this is a year before Psycho, which is often talked about as a watershed moment in the depiction of sex and violence on film. But, there are lots of other movies that could be talked about too, and here's one.
Yeah, this one does seem to be breaking some kind of ground.
But
here.
I think Imitation of Life was I think there is something to that movie was able to tackle themes in a melodrama in a way that felt prestigious and serious.
Isn't it Troy Donahue that attacks Susan Connor in Imitation of Life?
Surely not, is it?
I think it is.
Yeah, okay, so we looked it up, and it is, and I guess that's why I kept unconsciously thinking of him as a Nazi.
Well, he is a monster in that film.
And that's interesting in terms of his acting, because in that same interview, what's the critic's name? Harvey? James Harvey. Interview with Cirque from Film Comment that we talked about at the end of one episode. He talks about that scene. He's asked about that scene. And Cirque says that the actor was, he doesn't name Troy Donahue, but he said the actor was very obviously reluctant
Yeah.
to do it, and he told him, you have to embody whitey in this scene. You have to embody fascism. You're an abstraction. You're not a person. And it is, by God, perfect. Like an incredible scene.
Yeah. Well, he went right from that to doing this and being nice Johnny.
Holy.
So
Holy, I blocked it out.
this
I
guy
blocked out
has
the
more
possibility.
range than you suspected, at least.
Yeah, he could have played a monster or this.
So this is a marriage that cannot be fixed. This is a horrible human being, this mother.
And we've also found out around this time that she hasn't had sex with him, I guess, since they had their child.
Not much, anyway, so...
It certainly hasn't happened lately.
No. But the problem is not just that she's sexually frigid, because you could assume...
Well, she wants her daughter to be sexually frigid, too.
Yeah,
That's
but not
the problem.
not only all of that, because I guess therapy, but she's also this raging bigot. You don't even want to have sex with her. You don't want to fix that problem with someone like that.
Sure.
This poor guy is stuck with her, and now you just desperately want him out of that. And of course, you also feel the same way about Dorothy McGuire being stranded with a totally different kind of terrible spouse,
Yeah.
Arthur Kennedy.
Then we get a scene with Sandra Dee and her mother, who are sleeping in the same room. And Sandra Dee...
They make a bargain.
Well, she basically says she tries to bring all the heat down on herself. And her mother... This is like one of the rare scenes where the mother gets an opportunity to be semi-sympathetic. Like, you at least get to understand the logic in her own mind and realize she's not actually trying to destroy her daughter.
No, she thinks that she's doing what's right for her daughter. And we do see later the conversation with the grandmother, right? With Constance Ford's mother, and the same dynamic is there.
Yeah. So she basically tells Sandra Dee that she has to be a cock tease.
Yeah.
You have to lead them on, make them want you, but don't show that you want them, ever.
Right.
Be a good girl. And you can just, like, here's some of the wonderful acting of Sandra Dee. You can just see the total confusion on her face as she tries to process this insanity that is being said to her.
Yeah, sounds insane, but it's actually what pretty much most women in North America were brought up to think about the relationship between the genders.
But all of the enlightened Freud readers are, like, struggling against this.
Right, of course.
It's very... We saw a similar situation in our Japanese teen movie, liberal propaganda movie.
Yeah, I was thinking about that the whole way through.
10 years earlier, Blue Mountains.
Yeah.
And we talked in that episode, Setsuka Hara episode, about the historically recent phenomenon of dating and how everybody was trying to, as mores became more progressive, not just in America, but in many countries.
In all the countries America took over, yeah.
Right. How do real young people negotiate these changes?
Without a chaperone. Then she goes back, and this is one of the touchstone scenes.
And chaperones actually come up in this movie.
Yeah, exactly. Constance Ford said, in my day, we didn't go for all-day boat rides with a boy unless there's a chaperone there.
Yep.
And she's told that there's only space for two, so there can't be one. But yeah, Sandra Dee and Richard Egan have a father-daughter talk that sets up, I guess, most of the rest of the terms.
While they're snuggling in bed.
Yeah, and she says, do you love mom? Like, what is going on with your marriage? He tries to explain that he thought he loved her once, and he thought he could teach her what it would be to love, and he has failed. And mother just doesn't know how to love anyone or anything, and this is her problem. So she is presented as more of a patient than as a villain. She is pathologized.
Yeah, but in her scenes...
In such a patronizing way. Like, she's not even a person at this point. She's just a set of symptoms and neuroses.
Data points.
Exactly.
And also in her scenes where she is an actor...
But she's an automaton.
An agent, she is pretty villainous.
True, but you can't really even hate her because she is just a set of, well, as I say, just neuroses acting of their own inexorable logic.
If only Delmer Daves had been around to do Flowers in the Attic justice. With these two actors, too.
Oh, you feel like that's the perfect casting?
No, it's just that trashy novel could have been made into a good movie, and it never was.
So that's basically all you need to know about the plot. We're going to just more get into thematics, I think, now, and we'll allude to various plot developments as we need to.
Well, there's the boat ride, and what follows from that.
Well, yeah, and here, this is a mini Summer with Monika, I guess, in a way. They go on this harrowing journey.
It was really terrifying, because you think that the worst that's going to happen is that they're going to be tempted to have sex during this day.
No, they get that all knocked out of them by almost being killed.
And it's actually very
drowned.
Very frightening.
Yeah.
The filming.
They have internalized enough of the gender prescriptions or the prescriptions about premarital sex that they don't indulge in anything when they spend the night on the beach.
So I was trying to figure out this whole trajectory here, because everyone's talking about how sex is not wrong or bad, but at the same time, nobody actually wants them to have sex.
Well, because getting pregnant is a problem.
Well, I was waiting to see, is anyone ever going to say, from an enlightened perspective, what is actually the problem with teenagers having sex? And I was shocked to find the movie actually finally does say and show it.
Yeah, but they can't talk about it too cavalierly, right? Because the word pregnant is not supposed to be uttered most of the time under the code.
But I was trying to think about Troy Donahue's trajectory from respectfully being offended that anyone would think that he'd have sex with Sandra Dee to pressuring her to have sex with him. I was really formulating some theories about what does lead children, well, in a way children, what does lead minors, teenagers to have sex even though they know that the consequences could be very bad for them, and fucked up family dynamics, which is just about everybody in some way or other, I think does play a part in it. And it does play a part in throwing these two together in a very overheated way.
Yeah, well, that's true. Yeah, possibly the confrontation that he has with his lascivious dad is part of it. Yeah, he is very offended when Arthur Kennedy comes in talking about what might have gone on.
And I guess they're not as deeply in love as they have been after writing each other all these letters during all of this time either.
I do think it's perfectly consistent to be enraged by your lascivious father's suggestions that you might have had some nookie on the beach and still also actually want to have sex with the girl that you're in love with. You just might not want to talk about it with your dad, especially if he's going to be sniggering about it, right?
You're going to have to give us the man's point of view here.
He does have this deep urge to have sex with Sandra Dee, but he doesn't especially want to discuss it with his dad. And maybe he feels like it's part of being in love with her, which his dad is definitely not even acknowledging, right?
That's true.
His dad is making it seem like it's just opportunistic sex.
And he does make it clear at various points that Sandra Dee being, in his opinion, spawned by a lifeguard and therefore a low-class girl,
oh yeah, for sure,
isn't worth more than a bit of sex on the beach.
Yeah, Arthur Kennedy's totally fine with all of that. Take your pleasures where you can, and you marry someone like Constance Ford, I guess. I don't know.
But then what happens afterwards is what's really interesting. Speaking of Constance Ford, so she gets...
This was a horrifying scene.
It was wonderful. Instead of, expressing relief that her child isn't dead, as soon as Sandra Dee returns, she has an elderly doctor there ready to give her a complete physical examination to make sure her hymen is intact. And her father's not there to protect her.
He's on a business trip.
Yeah. Basically, the movie presents the examination between its physical and its psychological aspects itself as a rape.
Yeah, definitely. And Sandra Dee rises to the occasion. The sense of violation, it has to be communicated at top decibel, and she manages to do it. This is an atrocity that is committed against her. I don't see how any parent and child could recover from that.
No, they don't.
No.
As all this is happening, things have also been developing between the middle-aged lovers. So this is a movie about middle-aged and underage lovers.
The Cupid in this case is actually Beulah Bondi because of the leak in her water closet, as she puts it.
Right, so even though she's a snob who keeps calling
him lifeguard.
Yeah,
she's living 20 years in the past.
Nevertheless, she has advanced and progressive views on sex.
Very surprising. She overhears an entire conversation that happens up in the rafters when Richard Egan gallantly agrees to fix the roof, even though he's the major paying guest at their resort.
And then it turns out that Dorothy McGuire has to show him around, and they fully, volubly, and didactically discuss their relationship, because that's how everything gets discussed in this movie. It's all overheard by Beulah Bondi, who then fully, volubly, and didactically dissects it with Dorothy McGuire afterwards.
Life as greatly expanded therapy session. This
movie is way more Brechtian than anything Cirque ever did.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we have Sloan Wilson to thank for that.
Yeah.
Knowing what man in the gray flannel suit is
But
like.
I do think this is a better movie than...
Do you?
Yeah.
I think it has more, I don't know what you want to call it, like just more pop energy about it.
Yeah, I mean, I did like Man in the Gray Flannel Suit, but I think this has more verve, yeah.
I feel like it's interested in the story and themes it's communicating, but it's also just vibing on its stars.
Yeah. All of these scenes with Dorothy McGuire, she does beautiful work in them, I think.
Well, she's just, a dignified, older in movie terms woman. She's probably younger than I am in that movie.
Yeah, she's probably in her early 40s at this point.
Or at the same age or something.
Yeah, that moment where she says, "I'm sorry I'm not as beautiful as I once was," is really heart-wrenching.
Oh, right, that's later in the boat.
Yeah, when they actually meet for their tryst, their
Yeah.
first tryst.
And what does he tell her? I love you so much I can't speak.
It's beautiful. An enchanted boathouse. But there's a snoopy night watchman lurking around every window, so they're found out.
As soon as Richard Egan goes off on his train, the wife, that's when she calls her mother, which is the most sympathetic she ever gets in the movie, because we see that there's someone actually influencing her better impulses for the worst.
She's placed in context.
She does defend her husband and say he's not bad about money. We don't have to viciously entrap him because we're worried about not getting enough alimony, but her mother is adamant
No,
that if we're gonna do this, we have to do it the way the lawyer said.
Let's do it right. Let's get all the evidence against him, so it's not just his magnanimity that gives us the money, it's that he is backed into a corner and has to do it.
And she also is worried about it coming up that the wife has not slept with him. That could be a mitigating factor in him having an affair.
Yeah.
Hasn't slept with him in a decade or something.
So yeah, you better do your wifely duties or else it's going to count against us in court.
Well, no, what she says is that you have to make sure it doesn't look like you want the divorce.
Well, that's what I'm saying. Yeah, so if a wife is refusing to have sex with a husband, I think at that time that was a problem in courts, right? The husband could say, well, look, I'm not getting any at home, so this is why.
I actually think that in either whoever is refusing to have sex, that's a fair mitigating factor in a divorce case.
Divorce cases don't work this way anymore, but at the time, because we have no fault divorce.
No, exactly, because you don't have to get out of a marriage at this time. We should probably specify this for those who don't have the cultural context. You had to prove wrongdoing on the other party's part.
Yeah.
And not on your part because money is involved in property.
That's right.
And custody.
Yes, custody is the key factor for both of the good parents.
Even now, custody would remain an issue in terms of looking at each...
Yeah, but would adultery really count against someone for custody? It would be more
I have no idea.
I don't see why,
Well,
unless it went along with other things like violent behavior
it would be
and
more
drunkenness.
like, abuse and addiction. But here it's what Maisie knew, creating an immoral atmosphere for the children to experience.
Yes, exactly.
Is a problem.
After the doctor examines Sandra Dee, she runs out screaming. She sees Troy Donahue. They have
She does not? Oh yeah, after the examination,
Yeah.
she runs out.
She tells him what happened and then scurries off because her mother is coming for him. And Troy Donahue threatens to kill Constance Ford at this point.
Which I think everybody is feeling at that point.
So we've reached a very tense...
We've basically seen a mother rape her daughter, and that's why she is getting threatened with
murder.
With murder.
By our freshly scrubbed young star of the film, Troy Donahue.
Not see no more.
Well, Richard Egan comes home eventually, and there is a 6-way confrontation at a certain point with the sheriff.
Yeah, and so once the whole...
That sheriff got way more than he bargained for.
The whole awful saga of family ugliness, once it's all out in the open, the sheriff just throws up his hands and is like...
I'm getting out of here! It's like a cartoon or something. Like, whoa, Jesus!
And then even Arthur Kennedy gets to snub, what's her name?
Constance Ford. So that's the hierarchy. He shows himself to be a slight cut above her. When asked whose side he's on, he's like, well, I'm not on yours. That's all I can say. Whatever the fuck you're doing, I don't want any part of that.
I'm just gonna go off and drink some more.
Yeah, exactly. You know, he does get pretty bad as well. All the divorce talk is bad between the pairs. There is no amicable parting here.
Well, he's sophisticated. That's been established. His son even talks about his supercilious, intelligent mind later.
Yes.
So he is willing
to forgive her, for sure.
To overlook it, but he will also call her a big old slut several times if she is not willing to continue the marriage.
Yeah.
And if she insists on custody.
Exactly.
Which she does.
It's too late.
It's all come out in the open.
Yeah,
now.
the newspapers are full of the innuendo.
So, innuendo.
Exactly.
This is from Philadelphia Story. But so that's how they end up resolving this.
Yeah, we get a flurry of headlines. Everyone in America has read about the events that occur in the first half of this movie. All the tawdry goings on at the summer place in New England.
And then, to my surprise, the movie continues for a long time. That's only like the first half of the movie.
Exactly.
Now we switch gears, and the main characters are Troy Donahue and Sandra Dee, who have just decided that all of the adults are gross.
Yeah, they just wash their hands of the whole lot of them.
But they still like each other.
Yeah, exactly. Now, the custody has gone exactly as we were told it would. The bad parents have custody. Each of them is too bad of a parent to actually parent, so they send them off to school somewhere else. In the meantime, our good parents have married each other. It does feel a bit like what Maisie knew, right? Like all these different pairings and reconfigurations.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah.
Henry James, every type of melodrama can be found in its germ form in Henry James.
It's true. They have settled into a blissful existence. They have a house designed by Frank Lloyd Wright. Dorothy McGuire actually tells them that.
Yeah.
The only impediment to their happiness...
They're millionaires.
Yeah,
He's a millionaire.
It's great.
Yeah.
They're finally getting what they should have had 20 years ago.
The only fly in the ointment are that their kids hate them.
They're kids. It's your kids.
What's that from?
Back to the Future.
God, what are all these references flying around?
So what's going to happen with them?
So the middle part is where they're writing each other letters from school.
Yes,
but
he's
Sandra
in Virginia and she is somewhere else.
But Sandra Dee thinks that the mother will just kill him if they actually get together.
Right.
So that's all she's risking are these letters. But finally he's insisting on a meeting, so they make a date and a time to meet in front of a church.
Oh yeah, that's at Christmas, right? It's right before Christmas, yeah.
And that's when the mother is putting up her little fake plastic tree. We see some really of-the-moment Americana there.
Yes.
We see this little fake plastic tree that she is bragging about that it's going to last 100 years.
It's so flimsy, this little tree.
It's like the Charlie Brown tree, except it's plastic.
Yeah, it just has nothing going for it. I would want to leave my family home just because of that tree.
My mom and I had, when I was very little, a little tree like that we loved very dearly, but that was because she was a single mother and we lived in a tiny apartment. This woman has no excuse. Why doesn't she have a proper fucking Christmas tree?
She's a wealthy divorcee who's getting alimony. So
exactly.
Yeah, she could have a tree
and
that
then later on we see
touches the ceiling.
We see the millionaire and his wife in the Frank Lloyd Wright house, and they're eating on TV trays. Eating dinner on TV trays. No dining room for them.
No, wonderful.
Although they are at least all talking to each other, not watching TV.
That's true. Yeah, this stuff, it really puts you there in 1959. There is this meeting, and it's a prelude to other things that will occur between them. Their plot kicks into overdrive when they are both invited to spend time at the Frank Lloyd Wright house.
Wait. You're still skipping over the big melodrama slap. When they have their confrontation, because that's the last time we actually ever see the mother.
Yeah, it's true. She makes a phone call later, but that's it.
And that's when the tree that was going to last forever gets knocked over. Sandra Dee comes back from the meeting with Troy Donahue. Oh no, because they actually spend the whole day together and end up going to a cheap motel and talking.
Yeah.
And she tells her mother that when she comes back home, and then tells her to go get a doctor if she doesn't believe her.
Yes, exactly. And then she gets punched.
Then she gets the big melodrama slap. And knocks the tree over.
And this is not a Vida situation. You're definitely on the side of the daughter in this confrontation.
Oh, yeah.
That's the status quo there. Trying to meet occasionally when they can. They're writing letters mostly, but they're packed off to school. They're not concentrating very well. We do see Troy Donahue in a classroom.
Oh, he has a great speech there, though. He gets very existential for a moment.
He says he is not really planning to pursue anything that involves learning Latin. He's just expecting to get drafted any moment and be thrown into another war and probably blown to bits. And the teacher says, well, don't you at least want to be an officer so you could lead men? And he's like, no, definitely not. I don't know where I'm going. I don't want to lead anyone else. So
he is the paradigmatic, confused youth.
Yeah. which I can empathize with. I'm still a paradigmatic, confused youth, despite
Youth without youth.
gray hair. That's where they stand. But then they both get invited to the Frank Lloyd Wright house.
Yes. We're finally at the Frank Lloyd Wright house.
And they're very awkward meetings between the estranged kids and the parents. They really are mad at their parents for getting remarried. The good parents, they're mad at them because they should have just continued with the status quo as is and just taken it and taken it. The kids, they're almost like Cirque kids in this one respect, that they are not thinking about the problems their parents are going through.
Well, because in order to, as we were saying before, in order to, and this is like the Cirque kids and all that heaven allows, in order to be able to empathize with and understand what happened, they have to think about their parents having sex lives.
Yeah, and they don't want to.
They don't want to think of their parents as sexual. I mean, it's one thing to see that you're not sleeping in the same bed with your wife and be worried about what that means for how you feel about each other, but that's probably more comfortable than thinking that your parents want to fuck like bunnies.
Yeah, because they're making up for 20 years of lost time. It's upsetting to both of them. Nothing's really working. The good parents, they had the magic when they were just sort of talking about how understanding they are toward the kids. But they don't have any magic when it comes to communicating
why they've done what they did that looks bad.
That there's some kind of understanding between the generations has to go upwards as well. No, that doesn't happen. So the kids just want to get out of there. They want to enjoy some time together. They would want to do that anyway, presumably.
Of course. Who wants to hang out with your gross parents anyway? Your gross loving parents. Who needs that?
So they hit upon the idea of pretending to go to King Kong, which is being reissued, I guess, in 1959. They make a plan after first hanging out on the beach. And they talk about their intense feelings for one another. And maybe they will act upon them at this shack later on at night.
Well, Sandra Dee really doesn't want to, and she thinks it would be more prudent to be a good girl.
True.
In her mother's terms.
But yeah, when she talks about that, he gets very sulky.
Well, yeah.
He walks off.
Yes, he basically puts an end to their
day on the beach.
Yeah, their nice time together. So, in the social justice warrior internet terms of morality, he would definitely be a rapist in the scenario, but the movie presents things obviously the gender roles being played out here are excruciatingly terrible.
Yes.
But the movie does present... It's not that she doesn't want to have sex, period. And this is what gets missed in all of these internet discussions of these interactions. It's not that she, period, doesn't want to have sex and he's like a sex pest. It's that she is worried about her womb being filled with seed that will turn into child. And, her role, her social role, is to guard against this happening, and his social role is to not worry about it as much until it happens. So the woman is basically forced by social roles, a combination of wombs and social roles, to be the one who is guarding against this eventuality.
But then, the sex pest becomes a Frankenstein monster of its own, right? Because he's totally willing to take it all back, but it can't be put back in the box. He really wants to retreat, and she says, no, I know that you really need this to happen. He's trying to disclaim it, and she just keeps bringing it up, and then finally they do have sex.
It's true. The second time around, she is the one who is insistent on it, even though she says she's doing it for him and only wants it for his sake. I
mean, she may be right that he just can't wait any longer. Who knows? But the movie doesn't... it doesn't leave us with that simple portrait of it, because he insists that he's willing to be good.
Also, in his defense, he would be willing to marry her right now, but she also doesn't think that's prudent.
Or possible. And we see that it isn't, actually.
Oh, right, because they would need parental consent.
That's right. They're not of age to just do it unilaterally. There has to be someone co-signing it.
Yeah.
So that part is dead on the money.
And this is well before, perhaps or not, there is a condom involved, if he knows where to get one. I don't think he does.
No, there's definitely not.
Way before the pill. Pregnancies happen when condoms are involved, when teenagers are involved with the condom.
Yes, but in a movie like this from 1959, presumably there was no birth control used or considered. And it's a very interesting sex scene because what we see of it is her explaining the plot of King Kong to him. And then a very deep kiss this, and then we fade out on that. So that he can use that as an alibi later to explain that they were at King Kong twice.
It's pretty weird.
Yeah, it's very interesting.
Also, like, lots of giant close-ups of these soft little faces kissing.
Everyone is worried they're out all night again. This is getting to be a habit with these two. At least the Coast Guard doesn't have to be called this time. They do show up at 2 a.m. And everyone knows. They don't even get a chance to pull out their King Kong alibi.
Oh yeah, and then the parents have a great big discussion about it, where they say, well, we were also fucking at their age, and there are a lot of very intellectualized terms thrown around where I kept waiting for them to say pregnancy. But they can't. You're right, because of the code. They can't say the problem is pregnancy.
Yeah, they mostly just say, I'm getting into trouble, or I don't want to get into trouble.
Passions get out of hand.
Can say I'm going to have a baby, and I think that's how we're told. She doesn't say I'm pregnant.
Pregnancy comes up, the word definitely.
They do use the word? Okay, because that's...
Sure. I was waiting for it.
Hard to get past the...
I think the word pregnancy is used at some
Oh,
point.
maybe that's not as offensive as pregnant.
I'm not sure. It's one or the other.
There's still this real divide between the good parents and the good kids here. They're not simpatico. This weekend at the Frank Lloyd Wright house doesn't solve all their problems.
Well, it kind of makes
exacerbates
it makes
them.
it worse because the parents have been permissive and the kids have abused it.
Yeah.
And now trouble is going to ensue.
And we learn about it when she calls Troy Donahue. Sandra Dee calls Troy Donahue on the phone and explains that she's been to the doctor and it's happening.
Yeah, at that point, she doesn't say what it is. She's just in tears, and I mean, we know the tropes. So.
Yeah, he does exactly the right thing. He says, I'm coming to see you, and that's not easy to get from Virginia to Buffalo, but he's planning to do it in one night. He makes it.
When he meets her, she talks about how she gets cold every time she thinks about it, but he says he gets warm. He's very excited about it. It's going to be just great. They're going to get married.
It's like summer with Monika.
They're going to get married. They're going to have a family. It's all going to be fine.
But they have no money at all.
No, and they
Zero.
They have to get married.
Yeah, so they have to pawn a mink coat, which that was Chekhov's mink coat.
Yeah. Because I was like, that seems like a weird gift for that father to give that daughter, but no, it comes in handy later.
Yeah, it was a Christmas gift, trying to buy her affection back. That's what Constance Ford says. They get enough money to rent a car or buy a used car and travel all over the place looking for a justice of the peace that will take them in and marry them. No one will. They're not of age. They don't have anyone speaking for them.
But the first place they go is to Arthur Kennedy. They go to him first. That was their first plan. They were going to live there with him. Because he's so sophisticated, he'll be okay with it.
Arthur Kennedy, he has not been maintaining this resort. It's falling apart.
I'm surprised he looks as good as he does.
He's developed a brutal ulcer, we find out.
If this weren't a Hollywood movie, he'd be covered in his own piss and shit. Or a Hollywood movie of 1959.
Yeah. If it was a 70s film, they would have gone a different way with this. No, he's in his old Navy outfit, which was like, I guess, the best time of his life when he was in a PT boat in World War II. He's actually summoned the Coast Guard to come get him, bring him to the hospital because he's got a hole in his stomach from the alcohol.
He's like the dad in Summer with Monika. He'll just never come back from this hospital.
No, I guess not. He thinks he's talking to his son alone, and he says all kinds of revolting things.
He calls her a wench a lot.
Yeah, he does.
It's apparently a very brutal term.
A juicy little wench or whatever, but not someone that you marry. And she has had enough of this. She barges in and he's like, oh my God, I'm so sorry. And he's really honestly apologetic. He thought he was talking, just with his son here.
Mano a mano.
He's got enough of a vestige of that upper crust mentality that he does not wish to offend a lady, even when he is saying offensive things about her. And yeah, he just basically says, look, wait a couple more years and then you could do what you want. But I can't give you my blessing. This is stupid.
I think this might be the point where they say she's pregnant.
Maybe.
Somewhere around here, it gets said.
But yeah, he's not going to help. He's not rapidly condemnatory either, but...
No, actually, ultimately he ends up saying the same thing as the good parents, which is that you should just wait a little while.
Yeah. And, Arthur Kennedy is incredible in this scene. This is why they hired him, presumably, because I don't think there are many actors who could pull off this nice balance of
being revolting,
drunken uselessness, and actually kind of likability. Quite an incredible thing he does here.
We have to believe that Troy Donahue even thinks it's possible that his open-minded father could
just roll with it.
roll with it and let them live their lives there.
They can be the innkeepers. He can just drink by himself. But yeah, they didn't know about his health condition either. And anyway, the Coast Guard honks their boat horn and he just walks out of the movie at that point. That's it.
And then they try to get married on their own and they can't. So they end up sleeping in the car. Police are sent off after them because Arthur Kennedy calls
Constance Ford. Yeah, that kind of echoes sleeping in the boat in Summer with Monica.
Sure.
Sleeping in a vehicle happens in both movies as well. I wasn't expecting that.
They run away. But right away, the next morning, Sandra Dee, in this case, is the more sensible one, not like Summer with Monica. And she says, this is not going to work. We have to go to the good parents.
To the Frank Lloyd Wright house.
Because somebody has to give their consent or this marriage is not going to happen. So basically they have to swallow their pride and stop morally condemning these sexy parents.
Reach across the generation barrier.
Yeah, because they need their help. And that is actually often how broken families come together. When the kids need help.
And this film, you could say maybe it resolves everything a little too easily, but I don't think so. I think that it's more like the fact that they were having such difficulty understanding each other earlier that makes less sense, because
it's true.
The parents and the kids are both very likable and in general seem to be able to empathize with other people. They were just having trouble because of their parental
Well, you have to buy the trope of 1959 of there being this the beginning of this 60s generational divide, where there was just a distrust of authority figures and parental figures in general, especially if they prove themselves to not sort of live by their own standards.
Yeah.
Well, these parents never had hypocritical standards, so even that doesn't
really
make
didn't.
A lot of sense.
No.
It's not like The Idol.
Right. No. They were totally cool and with it the whole time.
The kids just weren't cool and with it.
That's the problem. And so all of this has happened in order to bring the kids into a simpatico relationship with their parents. And it works out beautifully as you would expect.
And then there's really not any problems facing these kids because other than parental disapproval and social shaming, the reason you don't want teen pregnancy
is you don't have the money, but they have the
money.
Yeah, no, so this is going to work out just fine.
Yeah, they'll get a fucking nanny for this kid and he can go to college and everything will be great.
Maybe he'll be drafted into Vietnam, but maybe not.
Oh, everything will be great until.
Yeah, well, he's rich enough that I guess he probably won't have to go to that either. Blue skies ahead.
He doesn't want to be an officer, we know that, so.
No. I really enjoyed the movie, and I found the ending actually very emotionally impactful, even though it's exactly what you'd expect.
Oh, did you?
Yeah. You didn't?
No, I can't see, other than Sandra Dee's sort of metaphorical, metaphysical rape, I didn't find it to be a terribly emotional movie. I just found it to be very interesting.
I'm very pleased with this double feature. It brought us into contact with some interesting things at either end of the 1950s and either side of the Atlantic.
Yeah, it was great.
Any further...
Good choices, Dave.
No, thank you. Any further summative comments?
Oh, no, but let's just mention The Emperor Waltz. On our ongoing project of fitting in maybe half of Billy Wilder's filmography. This was an unexpected one. You thought you'd seen it before, but you actually hadn't?
That's right. Yeah, I was confusing it with We're Not Dressing because they were part of a set of VHS tapes that were released, I think, in the 80s. Bing Crosby movies, and they were all sort of announced on the same little ad that showed before things, and I guess I mixed them up. So yeah, I had never seen Emperor Waltz.
So I was looking up A Foreign Affair online, and I found this very interesting, sort of academically dense online article. It was by a woman, I think. I cannot remember the site, but anyway, just search A Foreign Affair on the internet, look for commentary, and you will find it. This article had a lot of production detail and talked about what was going on in Wilder's life and career at the time. So A Foreign Affair was from 1948, and Emperor Waltz was released the same year.
Yeah, it came out the same year. It was actually made at the end of 46, and it sat for more than a year, apparently.
Because for some reason, the studio was extremely embarrassed by it.
Yeah, well, it's a real weird mishmash. But it actually finished number 7 at the box office that year. Bing Crosby could do no wrong in the mid to late 1940s.
So what was going on with Wilder's life at the time is, obviously it was the end of World War II. He had been asked to go over with the American occupying forces and be part of Germany's reconstruction, in charge of film in Germany, apparently. He, of course, famously also ended up making a film about the concentration camps. He was one of the people who did that. I haven't seen it. It's apparently very harrowing.
Yeah.
He lost, as we mentioned last episode, I think he lost his mother, stepfather, and grandmother to Auschwitz. They were in Vienna. Basically, his mind was, as you would expect,
Just knowing that this
just
had happened,
knowing and
the Holocaust
seeing the evidence and doing research and presenting it on film fucked with people's heads.
Yeah, well, it still fucks with people's heads.
His head was really, really fucked, basically. Want to get that across? When he was making The Emperor's Waltz. And he later said he should have been in a mental asylum at the time and not on a Paramount lot. That made me curious to see the movie. And I was watching it with all of this in mind, and it's an interesting comedy. It's very strange. And it actually does end up having a sort of metaphor about interracial, because Jews were seen in racial terms in Nazi Germany, obviously. Interracial intermingling and an attempt to destroy that product. And I mean, it's just fascinating to look at this movie that is this strange Bing Crosby Technicolor silly extravaganza about breeding dogs, and then think of it all as a Holocaust metaphor, which I think it is.
It definitely is by the end. It comes out of nowhere, but
it comes out of somewhere.
Yeah, that part of it is really quite incredible.
It's quite effective.
A lot of what comes earlier I could have done without. Very meandering. Not bad. I enjoy Bing Crosby movies, but it's kind of on the level of just horsing around road movie type stuff for a lot of it.
True.
I like Joan Fontaine in the movie. I think that she has some fun scenes.
Yeah.
It's actually a star-studded cast. People did want to work with Billy Wilder at this time as well, right? You got Roland Culver, who is a very distinguished British actor. I guess he was at Paramount at that time, because he's also into each his own, so he must have come across and done some things at Paramount.
But I mean, most Bing Crosby movies are only so good, unless you happen to be a big fan of that genre. So this one is different and worth watching, and certainly worth watching if you're doing an auteurist overview.
Yeah, that's the one thing I don't agree with.
Wilder's career.
People saying that it's hard to tell it's a Wilder movie. It may not be a great Wilder movie, but it's
you can
definitely a Wilder movie through and through.
A Wilder and Brackett movie. Their comedy is, it's a recognizable stamp.
So, check it out. Number 7 movie at the box office, 1948. Next week, Elise.
Yes.
It's Hollywood Studios Year by Year, MGM, 1933. We're going to be talking about Penthouse, directed by W.S. Van Dyke, and The Stranger's Return, directed by King Vidor.
How did we choose Penthouse?
It's a great movie.
Is it?
Myrna Loy, Warner Baxter.
So you've seen it?
Yeah, a long time ago.
Okay, I'll take your
Stranger's
word.
Return, I've seen more recently. I love that movie too. It's Miriam Hopkins in a King Vidor film, and King Vidor may be my favorite director, so I don't know if you can even really take me as an objective critic on this movie, but
most people like King Vidor.
It's incredible.
All right, sounds good.
See you soon.